TikTok, YouTube. It's all good. You ready to get into the news? Are we ready to get into the news? It's been a day. And a day news, so we have to go over everything. And there's a lot we didn't get to, unfortunately. I owe you videos on TikTok. I owe you videos on YouTube. I owe videos. It's what I do at this point. The articles are up on the webpage, but the videos still need to be made. So, all right, let's get started. First thing this morning, it was kind of slow when we started work this morning. Wasn't a lot on the table, but there was something, and that was finally that Peru has leadership. Finally, Peru has leadership. That's a good thing. They've been without a board for a long time, so the board positions have now been filled, and Alejandro Narvaez will act as president and chairman of Peru. He did serve as president and chairman from 2003 to 2005, so he is familiar with the company, is familiar with operations. He supposedly has a plan to turn Peru around. Let's hope that's the case. Peru has had a rough couple of years. We've seen gas stations closing down, right? It's just they haven't really modernized with the industry, and well, there's a lot to be done there. So hopefully Narvaez can turn them around and get them going in the right direction again. So that was the first story of the morning. The second story of the morning was a confirmation. And that confirmation was that Xi Jinping, China's president, would be attending or would be visiting Peru. He will also be attending APEC. He will be doing the port inauguration on November 14th at the government palace with Dina Boluarte and all of that stuff. They will not be going down to the actual port of Chancay because there are security concerns with moving them from Lima to Chancay because there's really only one route in and one route out. And that can create a lot of problems when it comes to controlling traffic and making sure that the people, the dignitaries are safe. They're very important. You can't have traffic around them. So they will not be going to the actual port itself, but they will be inaugurating the port in Lima at the government palace on November 14th. And then Xi will be staying around to attend APEC, or he will be around to attend APEC. Joe Biden will also be here for APEC, so you'll get to see an instance where Xi and Biden interact with each other. I'm sure that'll be fun for a lot of people. Now, Biden is entering a lame duck session as president, where it's going to be hard for him to do much of anything, get anything done. And so it's not like he can have real productive conversations with Xi at this point, but at least they'll get to meet and there'll be pictures and all of that fun stuff. And it'll look good for Peru that both Biden and Xi are in Peru for the APEC summit and for the port opening, which, by the way, is going to be a little bit awkward. I think the plan all along was to do open the port during APEC with the hopes that Biden would be there, NG would be there, and they would have like a really profound impact. But since Biden's Democrats lost the election in the U.S., I don't know that it's going to have the impact that Xi hopes, right? But it's still something that the Chinese president gets to open a port in Peru while the U.S. president is around. It really sends a message to the U.S. about how they have really bungled relations in South America as a whole, in Peru specifically, and how maybe for those who are interested in the U.S., they may want to have a better relationship with South America economically and otherwise. Then we moved on to a story that sort of surprised me a little bit, and that is division within the strike movement, specifically the transportation workers. Okay, so you have basically two groups of transportation workers. You have those who some would consider formal, and then some that those would consider to be informal. Okay, now the formal or the more formal group has stated that they will not be supporting transportation strikes during the APEC summit because it will make Peru look bad on the international stage. Fair. It's a fair comment, I suppose. I don't agree with it, but it's a fair assessment. Meanwhile, the more informal group, represented by Alianza Nacional de Transportistas and Asociación Nacional de Integración de Transportistas, well, they're going to strike. And they're going to strike because they feel like the government has not actually done anything to deal with the insecurity that they are dealing with. Now, interestingly, the formal workers agree with them that nothing has been done about the security issues. On that, they agree. Even though they've sort of like traded words in the media today, they agree that the insecurity issues have not been resolved, that there are still issues there. But the formal workers feel like the informal workers are using the insecurity as an excuse to get greater recognition from the government, as though they are formal members of the transportation network. In reality, some of them are. So in reality, not everybody who is an informal worker is actually truly informal. Okay? Some of the businesses that do participate in transportation that some would classify as informal are actually formal businesses with formal employees. Right? It's just that they're not part of this other network of more formal transportation corporations. So, like, it's a tough definition there either way. But I mean, there are formal businesses on either side, and some are choosing to strike and some are not. And I think the division overall doesn't look good for that movement towards towards dealing with insecurity issues. It doesn't really look good for them there. But I can understand both perspectives, where the more formal companies that feel like they are recognized already by the government really don't want to rock the boat too much, because they are benefiting from being recognized members of the formal transportation network, and they don't want too much competition there, right? They don't want the unionized group that they deem as being informal to truly be recognized. Otherwise, it sort of eats into their business. So I think overall, it's the fight is a business fight. It has nothing to do with whether or not the government is actually doing the right thing or actually helping them out. It's just, well, we need to make money, and we can align with the government and make money, or we can combat the government and maybe not make as much money. Moving on to the stories from this afternoon. First one, so schools and universities in Lima will be moving to virtual classes during the APEC summit. Okay. This was a decision that was made by the government. It's part of, I believe, sort of cutting down on protests. It seems to go along with that sort of thinking that they were having. So they've moved students to virtual learning. This has gotten a lot of criticism, including from past ministers of education in Peru, who have said that it makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. And one of the reasons they're saying that is that, yes, private institutions can push students to virtual learning. They have the infrastructure for that. The students likely have the infrastructure for that. But for the public school system, there is no infrastructure for virtual classes. So instead they go to distance learning. So and essentially students are sent home with schoolwork, and they do their schoolwork at home for a week and then come back. Right? There is no real virtual aspect to the public system. They don't have the infrastructure for it. They don't have like the online tools to allow teachers to hold virtual classes while students learn from their house. And in addition to that, students often don't have the infrastructure in their houses to do that. They either don't have access to a computer, don't have access to the internet, but something along those lines where they can't access the virtual learning anyway, right? So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to announce you're sending everybody to virtual classes when virtual classes aren't something that a large portion of the education system can even accomplish. It sort of reeks of a little bit of classism on the part of the government, where they do not understand the realities of families in Peru. They understand the realities of families with money in Peru, which is if you have money, yeah, you're going to have access to virtual learning. If you don't, too bad. Right? That's essentially what it comes off as. Is like a little bit of classism on the part of the government, where they do not understand what the realities are for many families in Peru who just don't have access to the infrastructure necessary for their kids to learn in a virtual medium. If they did have that, well, then the education standards in Peru would be much higher. Much higher. We've sort of done a little bit of news dump in the last hour. And this is where the articles are there. The videos aren't yet, but we'll get to them. So first is that Chibolin Andres Hurtado will be staying in the Lurigancho prison. The Supreme Court upheld his preventive detention for 18 months. He will be staying in the prison. He is cooperating with prosecutors, but he will be staying. He was attempting to get released from the prison into Lima, stating to prosecutors and the judges that he has ties to Lima. He has no intention of leaving Lima. You know, he's not a flight risk, but judges did not agree with that. Like, obviously, he's got a little bit of money, right? And so he has the ability to leave if he so chooses, right? So they wanted to make sure that they have control over him while he is cooperating. So they have decided, nope, you're staying in Lurigancho prison. I have stated from the beginning of the story that there's a lot more to this than I think we know right now. We know Hurtado has talked about rigging a judicial election in Lima. We know he's talked about a few other things in terms of bribery and influence peddling and stuff like that. We know he's already talked to prosecutors about those things. It's good that he's cooperating, and I'm sure we will learn much, much more over time, right? But we are nowhere near knowing the totality of what Andres Hurtado knows about corruption and bribery and influence peddling and all of it. Like he clearly, from what he has provided already, he clearly knows a lot about what is going on within the corrupt government sort of environment. So hopefully, by keeping him in the Lurigancho and making him available to prosecutors, we will learn more over time, particularly about Fuerza Popular, which he has already mentioned to prosecutors. He's already brought up Fuerza Popular to the prosecutors. That seems like it might be something. Should we not know about it? And the last story for the day is, it's Peruvian news, but it's not Peruvian news. Okay, it's news that impacts Peru, but not in Peru. Okay, and that is that there's now an expectation that U.S. deportation measures could be much larger than a lot of people thought they were going to be. This comes from basically two things that have happened in the last day and a bit, and that is that Trump advisor Stephen Miller he stated on his X account, so formerly Twitter, his X account, that there is a plan and there is an operation in place for denaturalization of some people. Who some people are, we don't know, right? Where those people are in the denaturalization in the naturalization process, we do not know, right? We don't know the details, but we know that he has said there is a plan for denaturalization, which then puts people who are in the naturalization process or perhaps even already naturalized at risk. Whereas I think a lot of people assumed before this was like people who crossed into the U.S. illegally, so undocumented individuals in the U.S., they were at risk of deportation. Well, now it looks like it might be bigger. And then Trump made a statement to NBC News where he stated that there would be no price tag on the deportation efforts. In other words, like, we will spend what we need to spend in order to make this work. And that says to me, and I think to a lot of people, that this deportation operation could be significant. It not just undocumented, certainly not just undocumented anymore when Stephen Miller says denaturalization. Like, that's a scary sort of prospect for Peruvians who have crossed into the United States, and there are a lot of them. And some have done so legally, and some have done so illegally, like as undocumented, going across the southern border. That's the more a matter of how much money do you have, right? So you have like the wealthier Peruvians who have like gone into the U.S. legally. They've gone over because, you know, they're members of wealthy families in Peru and they got their visa and they have naturalized there over time. Well, they may now be at risk. And that's not something like that was really ever considered, right? And then you have the group, of course, that went across like the U.S. southern border, for instance. That group is sizable. The group that goes across, that goes into the U.S. legally, is a smaller group than that goes in illegally. But at the same time, they're both sizable, and them returning to Peru creates a range of problems. You have families in Peru that do sort of benefit from or rely on family members that are in the United States that occasionally, send help, send, money back or something along those lines to help out. That gets put at risk if as many people are deported as it seems like will be deported. The other thing is that when those people do come back, economically, as an economy, Peru needs to then absorb those people in some way, which means you are likely to see an increase in informality in Peru in the short term, depending on the qualifications that those people have now that they would be returning from the U.S. Like there's a lot of concern there about the number of individuals who could end up back in Peru. 400,000 people left Peru in 2023, and it was slightly lower in 2022, but it's always like hundreds of thousands of people leave Peru for the United States yearly. That's a lot of people to come back that Peru needs to absorb somehow. And that families who do rely on their money in some way, they also need to deal with the loss of that sort of support. And that could be concerning for a lot of families in Peru. So, yeah, it's not looking like a pretty situation for the deportations in the U.S. right now. And there's a lot more that we will talk about over the next couple months when it comes to, as we get indications as to what the plans will be under a Trump administration in the United States, and then how that impacts Peru. Because we have some ideas, but as we get more clarity, I think that's very important. Because when politicians are campaigning, as I'm sure people in Peru are aware, because politicians in Peru do this a lot, they say one thing, and then when they get elected, they do another, right? So as we get clarity and statements are made and stuff like that, I'll try to keep everybody up to date in terms of what decisions are being made in the U.S. that are going to impact Peru, because there will be an impact. It's just a matter of what it is, right? We don't know about blanket tariffs. We don't know about deportation fully yet. We don't know about a lot of things that are going to impact the Peruvian economy, the Peruvian people, Peruvian families. And it's important to me more that, I understand that there's going to be a lot of people who watch who don't agree with my political slant, and that's fine. That's fine. I don't expect you to. I realize, I'm a privileged white guy living in Peru, right? I'm going to have a different perspective on things than a lot of you are going to have, right? So we're not going to see things the same way sometimes. I understand that. But I would prefer that you be informed and aware of things that are occurring, things that are said, so that you can, take whatever measures you feel are necessary. You can make decisions that you feel are necessary. I will. See, what I do, Carmen, is I go through the news first, what I've put up today on the website, videos I have managed to get out. I do that first, right? Just so you all know the different things that I've covered today and put up, and then after that we have a discussion. Right? We just have a discussion about Peru, about the news I've talked about, if you want to, about news I haven't talked about, because there's some, right? There's a lot that I haven't talked about. I'm one person. I can't cover it all. Come on. But that's the whole point to me, is that I'll tell you what I did today, the things that I saw, the things that I covered, and then You tell me, like, what's going on, what I should talk about, what I need to talk about. You ask me questions about, I don't know, some stuff. You know, the accounts aren't that old yet. Like, the YouTube has been active for, as an account, it's really been active for less than a week, right? The live has been active since this morning, right? So we had live access on YouTube this morning. So it's not old yet. And so we've had live access here on TikTok for a week and a half, something like that, right? The everything's new, right? So I don't think, like, especially as more people follow and more people engage, they get to learn the format and everything like that. But like, my whole thing is, I'll tell you what I saw, and I'll tell you what I covered, and I'll tell you what I thought was important today in the news, and then let's talk about it, because I'd like this to be bigger, and I don't think that news organizations, media, corporations do a good enough job of interacting with the people that they're actually telling the news to, right? And you should interact with the people you're telling the news to. Otherwise, you don't know what their concerns are. When you know what their concerns are, well, it's easier to adjust, and you create trust because you have a conversation. And the other thing is, I'm just south of Lima. Many people in the chat or watching will be in Lima, right? And you have one view of Peru, right? But that view of Peru is very different than somebody who's in Iquitos, or somebody who's in Arequipa, or somebody who's in Ayacucho, right? Like, Iquitos made news today because an agente, like a bank agent, at a bodega was held at knife point and robbed of 15,000 soles, right? Because, guys, criminality's everywhere. It's not just Lima, it's everywhere, right? And there are problems everywhere. Ayacucho also made news today because police destroyed 10 cocaine laboratories, right? It's a big deal. Everybody knows that occurs in Ayacucho. Everybody's aware of it. Everybody's aware of how Ayacucho is perceived in that way. But yeah, they destroyed 10 labs in Ayacucho today. And I think it's important that we don't just rely on what we think of a place, that we also have conversations and understand people who are from different places, who have different realities than we do, because Huancayo is not the same as Lima, it's not the same as Arequipa, it's not the same as Trujillo, it's not the same as Piura, it's not the same as Puno, right? It's not the same as Patacna. They're all different. This is why, like, the tagline for Pensante Peru, other than the news in English, which is sort of obvious because I'm speaking English to you about Peru, is 35 million conversations. And that's because there are 35 million, roughly, Peruvians. And if you're not having conversations, then you don't know. I live here now, Angie. I'm a resident. Not yet a citizen, but I'm a resident. I live just south of the Metropolitana on the playa. I prefer things to be a little bit quieter. This gives me a little bit more quiet being on the playa than being in the city, you know. It allows me to sort of concentrate on doing this too, right? That helps. So for those on YouTube who can't see, they're talking to me. They're talking to me on TikTok. You guys aren't talking to me. So I'm talking to them. It's weird though, because like TikTok camera, YouTube camera, right? So when I'm talking to you guys, they get a little bit of the side of my head. And when I talk to them, you get a little bit of the side of my head. I'm sorry. Yeah, but I mean, this is also for the fact that there are a lot of English speakers in Peru that don't engage with the news in Peru because it's not their mother tongue. It's just not how they do it. They just don't interact that way, right? They have other things that they're here doing. They love Peru. They love all the things about Peru, but they don't really interact with the news, and so they don't really understand a lot of what's going on. So it's also for them, it's for the expats who decided that they were going to come here and live in Peru because it's so great and all that stuff. It's for them so that they'll maybe engage with the news a little bit more than they have. It's for people outside of Peru to understand what goes on in Peru. Because, like, outside of Peru, you do not get good news about Peru. Like, you don't get good news coverage. I mean, you get lots of good news because, like, tourism in Peru, like, it's pretty amazing. But you don't get a lot of good news, like actual news coverage. You get tourism coverage, right? You should go see this place. You should go see this place, which is great and all, but it doesn't tell them anything really about Peru. And so it's for them also, those people who live outside of Peru and maybe want to know more, but don't really have a way to know more because the only real news media that exists in Peru currently at scale is Spanish, right? And there are great Spanish language creators on TikTok and on YouTube, both, that do amazing work, and they deserve all the credit in the world for the work that they do, and I can't say it enough, right? I'm trying to amplify, right? Trying to amplify your voice and their voice, and right, and that's why it's not just about me coming in here and saying, here's the news today, guys, see you later. Is because, look, we keep the live going, we have a conversation, and they get to hear a sort of how you feel about it, and you and I get to have a conversation about it. That's why, right? And that then amplifies your voice and your perspective about what's going on in Peru and what people should know about Peru, right? Like, it's important that we have those conversations where we acknowledge that there are people who feel like Peru is pretty much already a dictatorship. There are people who think that. I don't totally agree with them. I understand where they're coming from, but I don't really totally agree with them. I believe that, yes, it's authoritarian in some ways, and there has been a reduction in freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of protest. There's been all of those things, right? Don't think it's a dictatorship yet, but it's, I understand the emotional sort of reaction to what is occurring and saying this is not okay. Because it isn't okay. It is not okay. And we should have conversations about it, but it's not just enough that I say something. Oh, Donnie went over to YouTube. Donnie went over to YouTube to watch. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, you're in both. Donnie, you can't be in both. You can't be in both. But like my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Donnie, just my perception of it is that the TikTok isn't as delayed as the YouTube. So you should see what I'm doing on TikTok before you see what I'm doing on YouTube. It's just my understanding, which to me is weird. Like, guys, I had the live on my TV this morning. I wanted to see how it would look on the TV, right? Because that's important. Because some people watch, the live on a TV as opposed to like on a computer or a phone or something. And so I wanted to see how it looked. So I had it going behind me. I finished my live, and I still got to watch the end of the live on the TV. It was amazing how delayed it was. But yeah. I'm still working my way through this, guys, because again, the YouTube came online this morning. This morning it came online. So yeah. And I think, I don't know, Johnny could correct me if I'm wrong. I think the live looks better on YouTube than it does on TikTok. I got some work to do still in terms of like artistry and everything there. But I mean, to me, it looks better, a little bit better on YouTube than it does on TikTok. I don't know. So, yes. Is there anything else that people want to talk about what's going on? Yeah, it does look better. Yeah, okay. Is there anything else that people want to talk about what's going on in Peru? Is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Is there anything that I missed that you think I should have covered? Or do you just have a general question for me? Like the first couple of days I did this, I got asked like, do you like ceviche? Like, yeah, if you don't like ceviche, get out. But I mean, are there questions that anybody has? Or conversations you feel need to be had? Because if not, I'm just going to monologue at you. Just going to monologue. That's what I'm going to do. I still have 50 minutes in the schedule for this. There is so much corruption that there is so much, right? There's this is the problem with the level of corruption in Peru, is that like there's so much that you can talk about it constantly, and there are too many topics, so you don't even know which bit of corruption to talk about. Which one should you talk about? Like it's yeah. We've talked about it in the past about how the corruption you see politically is a reflection of the corruption you see at like the sort of lower levels. That Like, as a society, Peru has pretty much just accepted that corruption is within the system, right? And that's allowed politicians to be corrupt for a very long time without really having much of a repercussion for it. Like, there's no real punishment for it. It doesn't really happen. Like, to the point where, like, even like presidents who have been punished or have been like voted out of office because of their corruption, because of their incompetence, well, they just come back later, right? Like, Alan Garcia is the perfect example. Perfect example. That was one of the worst presidencies anywhere in the world in the last, I don't know, like 60 years. Right? And then he came back and he was president again. Now, he did a good job the second time, but he was more corrupt the second time. So, guys, right? And the fact that there's been 3 former presidents in court in the last month related to bribery charges. Like, oh my God. Can we do something about the bribery? And the judges are corrupted also. Or the judges are, well, you have judges who are put there through corrupt means, and then they are corrupt to pay back the corruption. Right? Like for instance, with Chibuin and with him rigging a judicial election in Lima, like, we don't know what's going to come out of that, because now every single case that judge oversaw, well, what do you do with it? You know, she was put there by a corrupt election to put her in that position, and she made decisions that impacted people's lives. And so what do you do with all those court cases now? Like, do you throw them out? Do you say they didn't matter? Do you act like they never happened? Like, what do you do with the fact that you have a judge who's corruptly put into a position and perhaps has to act in a corrupt manner to pay people back for that corruption? You don't have a justice system, right? And as soon as it's one judge, well, now you have to question every single judge. Every single one. How did they get there? Was it corrupt? Did somebody bribe somebody to get them to be the judge? Right? There are so many instances of the corruption that eat away at the fabric of like what is a country. Right? You need to have a justice system. Well, you can't have a justice system if the whole idea of the justice system is just based on how much money you have. That's not justice. That's just preferential treatment. There's no justice in any of it. But that's the system that's currently there. And that's why I said, like, the Chibuin stuff is going to get a whole lot bigger. A whole lot bigger. Because of the follow-on to it. It's not just that he was influence peddling and he was committing bribery. It's who he bribed, how he bribed, and for what purposes. Right? And that's what threatens the entire system. And we don't know what he knows. We know what he has teased prosecutors with, and that's it. That's all we know. That's all we know. And that's scary. That's scary that we can know on the one hand that it is very, very bad. And on the other hand, have no idea just how bad it is. That's scary. And it particularly, like, if you're a person who doesn't really have, if you're not a person of means, if you don't have wealth within Peru, then that's like, what does that mean for you? Like, what is the system saying about you? They're saying that you are less than, you're not as valuable, that you don't matter because, somebody can just be bought, and then whatever happens to you happens to you. Nice bodega you have there. Shame if anything happened to it. That sort of thing. And we're seeing that right now in some districts in Lima. I mean, you see the evidence of the money laundering and the embezzlement and all that stuff in every district in Lima. Don't get me wrong there. But you're seeing how people of a lesser means are being treated in Lima right now. The district's in a state of emergency. It's not San Isidro, right? This is how people with less get treated in Peru. And it has always been like that. And you're absolutely right, Angie. It has always been like that. It has. And it comes from immense amounts of classism, and we can have conversations about how that ties into Spanish colonialism producing a classist society, particularly within the wealthy upper class of Lima. We can talk about that. We can talk about still people today in Lima, who have household helpers where the helper has to stay in a certain part of the house so that they're out of the way, so that I don't want to see you, right? I can't interact with somebody that's less than me. That still exists in society in Peru, in Lima. I am a person of means, therefore you don't have the right to even talk to me if you don't share my level of wealth. That still exists in Peru. That's ridiculous. The assumption that anybody is better than somebody else simply because of their bank account is ridiculous. But it exists. It's how people treat each other. It's part of society. It's always been that way. It just is how it is. You should just get used to it. Accept it. Accept that the wealthy are going to do whatever the hell they want. Well, if you're not wealthy, you're going to have to deal with extortion, having your business set on fire, being shot at, grenades thrown into markets, those sorts of things, being robbed at knife point in Iquitos, right? Because it's everywhere, right? You're in La Libertad, well, your school's probably been a victim of extortion. Your local schools have been extorted in La Libertad. local private schools in particular have been extorted in La Libertad. So it's not like any aspect of the society is free from it. Like, schools are being extorted. Like, schools. Like, bus drivers, schools, shop owners, food vendors, taxi drivers. Like, who isn't being extorted? And this is where I hate to admit it, but I sort of, it's the one aspect where I do agree with Bukele if he just did a better job of how he managed it. This is the one place I agree with him. And like, I don't agree with Bukele on most things, right? But he's right. You have to get rid of the gangs. You have to get rid of the criminality. You have to get rid of all of it. You have to. No matter what the pain is for you economically, you have to get rid of it. Right? Now, I don't like the way he did it. I don't like that innocent people got sort of wrangled up in the whole thing. But like, he's not wrong. You need to get rid of the gangs, no matter what you need to get rid of the crime, the extortionists. You need to get rid of it all, no matter what the pain is to you economically. It's the one thing I do actually agree with him on. Nowadays, many just want to survive. Yeah, they do. But like, that shouldn't be their reality. Like, no matter how many times people tell me that Peru is a third world country, Peru is not a third world country. It is not. It is not a third world country. Peru is a developing country for sure, but it is not a third world country. It is not. And people don't deserve to be treated how they're treated here. Like, especially in that classist sort of structure that occurs in Peru. They do not deserve to be treated that way. Like, you should respect that they have a right to life just as much as you do. And that's not occurring right now. Which is why I support the people striking and protesting and all of those things, because they do deserve better. Right? Peruvians deserve better. This is not just them that's suffering as a result. I mean, even if you're wealthy, you're suffering as a result of this. You may not realize it because you're busy shopping, but you're also suffering from it. And it's not going to change unless the government is forced to change it, because they clearly have they seem to have no motivation to do anything. My Peruvian friends are inconsiderate. I don't know that that's true. I don't know your particular Peruvian friends, but like, if you're talking about Peruvians in generally, no, they're one-on-one dealing with everybody. Everybody's highly considerate until it comes down to, do I have to do something for you? And then it's a matter of whether or not you're deemed to be part of the group that deserves to have something done for them. Right? And like, sure, I'm in that group, right? But a lot of people are not. Right? And they also deserve just as much. There's no difference between me and, there's no difference in value between me and somebody who lives in in Lurigancho, and Lurigancho is in a state of emergency, and I'm not. That's true, Angie, in a lot of ways, because there's a difference between so many. Like, it's part of their being. It's part of their being, like so many Perus, right? That it's like they create boundaries as opposed to like getting rid of them. Yes, yeah, a lot of people are very individualistic. That I agree with, but I think at the same time, people are individualistic because, I mean, you have a lot of people that are just focused on surviving, right? And when you're focused on surviving, you're not really focused on like what you can do for other people. You're focused on how you're going to make it through the day. Yeah, the enemy of a Peruvian is another Peruvian. Yes, I have heard that a few times. I would say it's mostly true. It's mostly true with one exception: Chileans. Because that's where I would, because like if you had two Peruvians together in a room and they were enemies with each other, but then you put a Chilean in the room with them, the Chilean would become the enemy. Like that's the one thing where I'm like, okay, yeah, the enemy of a Peruvian is another Peruvian until you put a Chilean in the room, and then it'll be the Chilean. That's my understanding. Yeah, that's just my understanding of it. Now, I have a lot of solidarity. Sorry, there's a car alarm going off. As you can probably hear, I have a lot of solidarity with the people of Huancayo, with the people of Junin, right? So, with the people of Concepcion, right? So, to me, like Chilean, no. But, like, I also do like Chile. Like, I've been there. Their food isn't as good. It's nowhere near as good, but, like, it's a nice country. It is going to be incredibly busy in my town for the summer. It's something I don't really look forward to. It's a democracy. Yes, it's a form of democracy. It is a representative democracy. It is a constitutional republic. People will describe it a lot of ways. If you wanted to just do the overarching term, yes, it's a democracy. Oh, I'm aware of it. I was here last summer, and like, oh my God, you can't even breathe on the beach. Like, if you go down to so if you go down to Playa Norte here, no, you, no way, no way. Yeah, you can't breathe on that beach because it is so packed with people. You have to get there at like 5 o'clock in the morning and claim your area if that's what you wanted to do. But then after that, it is hot and everybody is on the beach, right? So the other thing you can do, so what a lot of people do is they will go down to Santa Maria del Mar or Embajadores to try to get beach space, but even that gets busy. Not quite as busy as here, but it gets busy. Nobody, though, goes to the beach in Punta Negra because get in that beach, get in that water, I dare you. Yeah. Nobody wants to go into the water at Punta Negra. That's a good way to break a bone or something. Get cut up by all the seashells. But no, 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 no other business for now. We're gonna get this rolling and going and get some exposure for it and all of those things. We're gonna give it time to grow and to be seen, and we're going to work on it, and then we'll see about other businesses. But we're going to give this the respect it deserves, and we're going to try to make this work, because English language news in Peru matters. And I know this, like, if you're a Spanish speaker, you're like, we have enough news and it's all crap and they're all bought and they're all corrupt and we don't need any more goddamn news. No, you need news. You need English news because you need something that's going to push Peru out to the world. And if you're going to be pushed out to the world, it needs to be in English, unfortunately, because there's just too many people who will not engage with Spanish language news. Yes, I'm declaring it, and it will come true. Sure, I'm gonna try. The effort will be there. I don't know that the self-affirmations will be there, but even when I'm not self-affirming, that doesn't mean I'm not trying very hard to make it work. So hopefully, yes, we can slowly improve things day by day and get more exposure. And we are seeing that. We are seeing numbers go up. We are seeing exposure go up. We are seeing access go up. I am hoping that shortly the production value on TikTok will match the production value on YouTube. And that'll help as well. I hope that we are able to reach monetization, which will also help a lot, because then we can start to look at, who do we bring on board? What do we do to make this better? Because there's got to be video editing, there's got to be journalists, there's got to be, and everybody has to be bilingual. That's the other thing. So, got to do it. Hey, I'm trying. So it's why I ask people, just like and share and comment on videos and all of that fun stuff. Yeah, just like, share, comment, subscribe, whatever the term is, depending on whichever platform you're on. So if you're on YouTube, you're subscribing. If you're on TikTok, you're following. Because if I asked you to subscribe, then that's gonna cost you money, which I'm okay with. If you guys want me to do that, I can do that. But yeah, hopefully we reach monetization and we are able to grow and slowly put together a team of people that will make this truly work. Because it needs to work. It absolutely needs to work. Peru deserves for it to work. You're hosting APEC this year, for Christ's sake, and you don't have English language news. Your CNN broadcasts come out of Argentina. Your ESPN broadcasts come out of Argentina. Peru doesn't have that infrastructure, but Peru deserves to have that infrastructure. Peru is better than fucking Argentina. Pardon my language. But yeah, Peru is better than Argentina. Peru should have this sort of infrastructure where Peru has English language news. Like, it's what Peru deserves. Right? It just is. And yeah, I hope that people appreciate it, I guess. I hope that they do. And if they don't, they don't. Right? Fine, I guess. But I mean, I hope people appreciate it. I hope people appreciate like what the goal is and what it's meant to do, because I am tired myself. I am tired of seeing how do I put this politely? Uninformed freaking gringos. That's what I'm tired of seeing. Right? I don't mind tourists. I don't mind, well, sometimes they're a bit annoying, but I don't mind that. I understand why people are tourists to Peru. Like, I live here. I see it every day. I understand why they're a tourist here, right? Yeah, the subtitles are an issue specifically for live broadcasts. So the subtitles are on every video now, or they should be on every video now, but on live broadcasts, it's an issue that you can't closed caption it. I don't have somebody in the background typing everything that I say, and that would be really confusing for them if a person did exist, because I don't know that I speak in a way that can be properly closed captioned. Yeah, I'm sort of the same way with Spanish. I understand a lot of what is going on. Like, I read Spanish fairly well, right? Not perfectly. I still have to like translate more complex language, of course, but I read it pretty well. Speaking it is another thing, right? So, yeah. Entender mucho. No habla mucho. And that's a bit of an issue, but I mean, like, that's why I think like I'm good with starting this and getting it going and getting it starting to grow and all of that stuff. But I believe for it to truly work, you need people who are like truly bilingual. And not just bilingual in the sense that you speak Spanish, but that you understand Peru. Like, people who are native Peruvians, they really get it, right? They understand how Peruvians talk to each other, how Peruvians act, like the body language, the other things. They also need to understand that. Like, that's because it's important as a journalist that you understand the body language and like the tone and intonation of the speaker. So to me, like, when it comes down to it, I'm good with starting this. I'm good with being the guy who's like opening the door, But when it comes down to it, I need to be able to bring in people who are truly bilingual, who speak really good. Like, I have nieces that could do this, but I mean, I don't know that they'd ever be interested in doing anything even close to this. Ooh, what do I think about it? Humala? You mean former President Humala? Or what's his name? No, that's Olanta. Antoro is? Oh, Antoro's, yeah. Okay, now I know who you're talking about. It took me a second. Um, took me a second. What do I think? That's complicated. Yeah, Antoro. Yeah. Naroyanta. Yeah, Antoro. Um, I think it's government overreach. It's government overreach. It's judicial overreach. It is. I understand disqualifying the party from participating in elections. I do understand that. Okay, I understand the perspective there. For him personally, it's government overreach. I think people have a freedom of speech. They have a freedom of expression. They should have the right to associate with whoever they choose to associate with. I also understand, though, that the government feels, and people in general, or some people, especially if you're of a certain age, feel very threatened. Right? So, like, for him personally, the government's just being dumb. For the party and wanting to disqualify the party from national politics, that I get. I don't like it per se. Like, I'm more of a believer that, like, you have conversations with people, right? That, like, you don't order the party to disband entirely. Maybe ban them from holding office, but don't disband them, right? Because you still want to be able to have conversations with people. That's how you get to resolutions. That's how you get to peaceful interaction, is having conversation and understanding. And I think you need to be able to do that. You really do need to be able to do that. We saw this in Colombia with the FARC. And I understand that there's a lot of people who will say, like, no, not in Peru. This is Shining Path. We don't want to support anything that's connected with Shining Path. And I absolutely understand that perspective, because I understand what Shining Path did. Not from the perspective of being a Peruvian, but I understand intellectually what Shining Path sort of did, right? And the impact they had on Peruvians. And so I completely understand saying, no, like, connected to Shining Path, no good, go away. I understand that. I would just prefer that people took the time to have conversations with each other, as opposed to just, like, basically banning interaction with them. right? I Yeah, I think it's like that's why I say if you wanted to ban the party from participating in from holding national seats in office, okay, I understand that. But I think you should allow them to exist so that there is some sort of apparatus there for you to have a conversation with. Because as soon as you take that away, well, then now how are you going to interact with those people? How are you going to have a conversation with them? And aren't you just creating the same situation that led to Shining Path in the first place, right? Did like Shining Path emerged because of the idea that that this group of people did not have a voice, or they felt that they didn't have a voice. They felt disenfranchised. They felt like they didn't have a say. They didn't agree with what the government was doing, and they emerged out of that sort of vacuum of there not being any real say for that group of people. And look what Shining Path did to Peru. Like, look at the damage that Shining Path did. And you can't put yourself in a position where just out of hatred, you recreate the environment that created them. You can't do that. You're giving them power now by saying, you know what? You're right. We don't really want to listen to you. We don't care. Right? If you can't, like, and for him specifically, he's part of that too. Listen to him. Have a conversation with him. Don't just, like, I don't know, detain him or put him in some sort of detention or put him in jail, or don't do that shit. Because now you're just giving power to everybody that holds a belief. And you don't know how invested in that belief system he personally is, I don't think. Like, there's some investment there, but and that it, but you don't know how there's a difference between sort of empathizing with it or sympathizing with it and being full on radical terroristas, right? And so I don't know how far along that line he is, right? But he doesn't seem to be anywhere close to full on scale radical terrorista, right? And so it doesn't seem to be. Personally, he doesn't seem to be. And so why aren't you just having a conversation? That's all you need to do. And I say this from the perspective of somebody who spent a good chunk of their life fighting terrorists, but also talking to terrorists, right? And if you take away somebody's voice, you're just making them stronger in a way, because they're going to stop talking. If you take away their voice, they stop talking, but they continue to send you messages. And that's the dangerous part. If you take away their voice, they're going to stop talking, but they're going to continue to send you messages. Right? And it's going to be those messages are going to be in forms that you don't like and that are painful to your people. So have the conversation, even though you don't want to, because it's conversations that keep people safe. Because when people are talking, things are fine. When they stop talking, things get dangerous. Right? That's the part I don't like about it. I really don't like that part about it. But again, I understand why they'd want to ban the party, though. I understand why. And I understand that why they want to persecute him. But persecuting him doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't make it better. You've got to find a way to heal. And you've got to find a way to have a conversation. Right? You don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Because what happens now that you're done? Well, what happens is like you immediately start police operations in Ayacucho to dismantle narco trafficking that's linked to Shining Path. Right? And then what comes out of that conflict? Are we going to see anybody injured or killed on the police side? Are we going to see people injured or killed on the other side? Well, probably. Right? Yeah, he basically wants all foreign companies out of the country, which isn't going to happen. It's not going to happen. He can want it all he wants. It's not going to happen. Right? So you can still have a conversation with them and say, okay, we understand you want all foreign companies out of the country, but okay, it's not going to happen. Right? You don't have to agree with them. You don't have to say like, okay, of course, let's just go ahead and do that. Right? You don't have to do any of that. Just, okay, if that's what you want, but like, it's not going to happen. Right? Like, it's just not how it happens. Like, great, you want to have a Chavezista sort of movement. Great. It's not going to happen. This isn't Venezuela. Right? Sorry. Also, if you do it wrong, even if you do agree with it, if you do it wrong, you know what you get? Venezuela. Because they did it wrong. You need to spend years educating your population if you're ever going to do that. You have to spend years educating your population and setting up the infrastructure that foreign companies set up, right? That they spend money to set up. So, got news for you, it's not happening. But, okay, it's nice to hear that that's what you would prefer. Moving on, what should we talk about next? And that's all it has to be. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. But just have conversations with people. Otherwise, you stop talking and bad things happen. All right. So, we got 7 minutes left. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? It's been a slow live tonight, by the way. But anything else anybody wants to talk about? If there is anybody left on YouTube, I don't know. When it's your first day of lives, you're not going to get a lot of viewers, so whatever. But I do have somebody, so that's good. Anything else I'll have to talk about? Do I have to do like an auctioneer? Going once, going twice. guess we're done here then. Translate. Monday through Friday. You can see it if you're on the YouTube side. You could actually see that it says welcome to the news, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. So 2 lives a day, starting at noon and 6 p.m. and Monday through Friday. And like sometimes I'll pop in on the weekend. Sometimes I will, but usually I try not to. I try to allow myself to like have like some days off where I'm not in front of computers all day, because like there's this phone and that laptop and that camera, and it's, so I do try to give myself some days off. But yeah, Monday through Friday, 12 noon and 6 p.m. We do an hour in the midday, and we do an hour and a half at night, just to talk about everything. Okay? And of course, on TikTok and on YouTube. Now, as of this morning, I wasn't planning to actually launch it until Monday, and then I ran a test last night to see if it was going to work, and it worked, and I was like, screw it, we're doing it now. I don't think so. I don't think I have Daydreamer. I don't think so. Or I have, but it was a while ago. So I'm gonna get ready to take off. So follow on TikTok, like and subscribe on YouTube. Both are at Pensante Peru, or Pensante Peru, because you have to say it the right way. And again, noon and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, we're here, and sometimes we pop in when we want to. Okay, I will see everybody Monday for schedule wise. I'm scheduled to see you again Monday, unless I see you sometime on the weekend. But I will see you for sure on Monday at noon, and we'll have a lot to talk about then. We're going to have a lot to talk about next week. A lot to talk about.